Welcome in, folks. For those who do not know, my name is Guest, also known as ItsGuestGaming, and I am pre-recording this because if you're watching this on release, I am currently lying around New York right now on vacation, so I apologize in advance if for some reason the information we had previously about GWENPOOL is slightly different than whatever they decide to release at the Season Pass video. But as of the data mines when I'm recording this video, GWENPOOL as a 4/6 is coming to Marvel Snap as the Season Pass card. So fingers crossed that the data stays the same so that these decks make a lot of sense. Let's go take a look at what she's currently slated to do as a 4/6, which is kind of that you never know if it's worth it card until you read the ability and then realize that it's a on reveal, pick a random card in your hand 3 times, then give +2 power each time to those cards. So wait a minute, is it a 4/6 or is it a 4/12? Because that's a lot of power. So if this releases as it's data mined as I'm recording this, because once again, while I'm on vacation, y'all hit that like and subscribe button, please. It really, really tremendously helps me while I'm away, gets the video out to people, gets the algorithm going and says, YouTube, hey, you should look at this guy because you all support me. So thank you for that. I think that GWENPOOL at this stat line, if it releases as this, is going to be very underrated. And then they will play it and then go, holy crap, that's a good 4-drop. Because I think it's really going to come down to hand control. And we started to see a little bit of that hand control element with Makari last season. So with this, I think that you're going to want to capitalize on it similarly by really trying to have a certain amount of cards in your hand, so a lot of littles may benefit, but if you do spread wide and hope for a potential late hit, how can you capitalize on it? GWENPOOL may be one of the better 4-drops to come to Marvel Snap in a while, in my personal opinion. I think that people will sleep on that stat line because they're not sure of what the upside will be based on their hand at random. But as deck construction starts to build out, I think that GWENPOOL ends up being a very strong card in Marvel Snap, and I'll show you a couple reasons why. So as per tradition in all of these videos, we start with a Silver Surfer deck, but a slightly different one. This is all the new cards, okay? It has Phastos, it has Makari, and it has GWENPOOL. Why? Because you want to put Phastos down on turn 3, as we've talked about in previous videos. Makari flies out all by herself, so you never have to worry about her. But GWENPOOL on turn 4 could potentially give extra power to Sebastian Shaw. And by having her drop on turn 4, the cards that you've put out early, like Mysterio, like Dazzler, like Nova, you've really left yourself with a very limited amount of 3-cost cards that you'll play on turn 5 and turn 6. No expedition needed. Don't need to put a Sarah necessarily in here. Could you? Sure, you could probably take out Absorbing Man and put in Sarah, or maybe take out Makari and put in Sarah. But I don't think you necessarily need to do that because this is that defensive tech build that takes advantage of the big Dazzler. And even without having Killmonger in the deck, I think that there's so much counterplay going on to Zoo by this point that I'm just throwing Nova in here as the 1-cost card just to say that it's in here. You want to play the combo, go ahead and put it in there. But I think there's enough counterplay already happening that it actually ends up being its own counter because lots of people are going to start moving towards Killmonger decks. So this is me projecting ahead of time saying that you don't even need to say Killmonger belongs in this deck. If you end up needing it, go ahead and take out Makari or Phastos and put in the Killmonger. If you don't have them, there's your substitution right there. But I think Nova makes the deck either way, even in a Dazzler deck, because it's going to want to explode earlier rather than later. So that's the build on Gwen Surfer. Now we start getting really down the weird rabbit hole. So Gwenrod, it's a Nimrod destroyer build. And I liked GWENPOOL into this because it's basically another variation to what Shuri wants to do, right? A lot of people would run this style of deck and they'd put Forge into the deck, as in a just in case, if you didn't get Shuri down on 4, you could play Forge. I think GWENPOOL brings very similar benefit, even though there's a little bit of randomness in RNG. Either way, if it's hitting the Nimrod, the Artem Zola, the Null, or the Destroyer, you're still getting power that's going to come down onto the board, and it doesn't have to survive on the board because then you get the Nimrod down, and then you're replacing that 6 for, if not a 6, for an 8 or for a 10, or even if you're really lucky, potentially a 12 power card if it hits a lot of Nimrods. So I liked the idea of building a straight up, it's a Nimrod deck. You can destroy everything if you want style of deck. And then worst case scenario, you still have the Null into Arnim Zola package as your turn 6, turn 7. This is a very heavy magic deck though. Very heavy on magic. So if you don't play magic on 3, it does feel a lot more restrictive if you're not perfectly set up for the original line of Shuri, Nimrod, Destroyer, or Arnim Zola to take your chances. But depending on what's going on in the meta, if there's a lot of location change out there, you may want to hold off on this style of deck because magic being turned off really can hurt the final plays of what this deck does. But I like the idea of Gwenpool giving those extra buffs to Nimrod and friends, because it can also then be something that gets destroyed later on, which will in turn feed the Null. So we got a couple of different ways to use Gwenpool in a Gwenrod deck. Next, Gwong, which is just such a fun name because I loved the idea of Arnim Zola in some capacity. So a deck that in total does not have a lot of starting power ends with a ridiculous amount of power. The highest card is Gwenpool at a 4/6. Next to that, it's Ravonna Renslayer at 2/3. And then everything else is slow amplification mechanics. Whether it's the White Tiger, whether it's the Sage, whether it's the Shuri, whether it's the Wong, there are so many different ways that extra power sprouts out of nowhere from this deck that Gwenpool fits perfectly. Because even having Wong into Gwenpool to get a whole bunch of chaos, that could be a lot of fun. This was essentially taking a Mr. Negative shell and removing Mr. Negative. Because one of the things about Mr. Negative shells that are so awful to work with is, well, if you don't pull it, what do you do? This is one of those negative shells that survives that. And without having Mr. Negative in the deck, your opponent probably thinks you do. You don't have to play Mr. Negative to make a Mr. Negative deck work, as weird as that sounds. But in this variation, I like the idea of taking Gwenpool as the full substitution for Mr. Negative and having those pluses go onto cards that will sprinkle onto the final 2 turns, because it's a lot of reduced cards via Ravonna Renslayer. If you want to Mystique it, go for it. I wouldn't recommend it. I'd try to get Wong down first, then Mystique, and then just let all the chaos ensue afterwards. All of the Tigers raining on down, all of the Iron Hearts raining on down, doubling the Sages. Like, there's so many things you can do with this deck. And I think Gwenpool, oddly, fits really well into it because you don't have to worry about Mr. Negative needing to drop down on turn 3 to make the deck truly work. It still works on curve just because of Ravonna Renslayer. So I like that for her, and I like that for this deck. Hela Swims. We're gonna put Hela into the pool. I know, don't hate me. Look, Hela, had her nerf with the -2s, but it's just really strong. And I decided to take out the Black Knight to put in Gwenpool because that helps to counter some of the chaos that happens from it, because you can still get cards down for really, decently cheap, considering Jubilee and Corvus Glaive and Blink, and just get the cards to appear on the battlefield. So Gwenpool now benefits the ones in your hand. It's helping to counter by allowing you to have that Hela, for example, or Blink now get +2 power, +2 power. Just counterbalance it. I don't think you necessarily need to have the Black Knight to make this deck good. I think that Gwenpool might be able to make this deck still consistent because it will evenly counter what Hela's doing, which is bringing back on average about 3 cards. If you get all of it to happen, Blade plus Corvus plus Sif, you got 4 cards, awesome. You've almost fully countered that with Gwenpool by having Gwenpool go down on 4, then Blink, then Hela. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good combination right there. So I like what this can do. And I think Gwenpool sadly fits into a Hela shell as a counterplay for it organically. Now back to that Mr. Negative conversation. If you're going to play negative, play negative. But you need to have another lineup. And I kept looking at this deck going, how do I put Sage into it? Because Sage in this deck feels very, very good. You can put Sage in for Ironheart, but I really like Ironheart in this deck. And then same thing with Psylocke. I really like Psylocke in this deck simultaneously. GWENPOOL in a Mr. Negative deck is the same kind of mentality as Jane Foster, where it really only has play if you have it in your hand prior to doing the negative thing. And man, getting that combo to pop off will feel incredibly good. Incredibly good, because then you can counterbalance. Let's say you pulled that 5-0 Iron Man, and then you get negative. Nothing feels worse. But if it's now a 5-2 Iron Man, that definitely helps to take some of the sting out of it, because GWENPOOL adds that on. I'm a big fan of GWENPOOL into a negative build. You could probably take out either Jane Foster, Psylocke, or Ironheart for Sage, because Sage is just an incredibly strong, powerful card. Magic, I was looking at different variations, but I don't like too many negative decks that have Magic in them, just because they can be easily turned off, and it's hard to decide if you play out all your power early or not. It's better to go in with one game plan with Mr. Negative more often than not, in my personal opinion. So if you are going to play Mr. Negative for GWENPOOL, go ahead, do it without Magic. That's why on the other deck it's structured the way that it is. Gwengamesh, because Gilgamesh was one of the best cards last season once it got buffed. And this is leaning into that similar mentality of it doesn't need to be a blue Marvel deck to make Gilgamesh a very strong card. You've got Okoye, you've got Elsa Bloodstone, you've got that Kitty Pryde Angela Athena package, and I decided to just do something fun. I put in Punisher, because I don't know why people aren't playing Punisher with Gilgamesh. It's a guaranteed buffed up card, and that's exactly what I wanted as another 3-cost slot option. He's gonna be a 3-4, 3-5, 3-6 even, and guaranteed to buff up Gilgamesh as long as you put him in a lane that has any cards on the other side of it. So I did something a little different. Why? Because we need to play Punisher. We need to try different cards every now and then, and I think that Gilgamesh, who wants all of these extra buffs to be dropping onto the battlefield from, you know, Angela, Athena, the Okoye ramping up cards, the Elsa Bloodstone ramping up cards, you want to look for decks that allow Gilgamesh to drop down on turn 5. I think that this does that. I think it very much so does that. But if you need to play it on turn 6, you can play GWENPOOL, then play other cards, and then Gilgamesh on the final turn with Kitty Pryde. So I like Gilgamesh a lot with GWENPOOL. They both want each other in a weird way. Lastly, Millpool. And as a regular Mill hater, this deck has some beef to it, and I'm not happy about it, okay? First off, Mill is an incredibly strong deck. It's an annoying deck for a lot of people, but it is incredibly strong. And with the reduction that happened to Cannonball previously, who was looking for a new home, Doc Ock ended up filling that home. It was basically Doc Ock on 5 and then either Shang-Chi or Cannonball on 6. It had some options. It had some flexible options. So where does GWENPOOL fit into this mix? This takes that top end and really sends it over the top, or it allows you that later backup play that actually has some weight to it. Because playing Shadow King, as great as it is in a certain lane, you need to beef up your other lanes later on. Extra Power is going to be able to do that via a card like GWENPOOL. Playing down the White Widow, bigger differential in that card. That's now essentially a 2/8 if it gets hit once. That's a good deal. White Widow feels bad when it's only a 2-power card. When it's a 4-power card, it feels really, really strong. But even if it's just statistics, like beefing up Gladiator to 310, more of a guarantee of destruction, that feels good. Helping to beef up the Shang-Chi to really go over the lane and what the Doc Ock did. Cool, great. More power to Red Hulk. All the more power to Red Hulk, why not? I think Mill, oddly, just looks for random power in random places like White Widow and Cable and Gladiator. So Gwen kind of fits into that exact need of this needs a little bit of power. Even Cannonball, this just needs a little bit of power. Here's a little bit here. All right, fits into the curve of what the deck wants to do already, which is a lot of Mill on 1, 2, and 3, what do you do in turn 4? And then the big combo on turn 5 and 6. Fits perfectly into that curve. That's why I decided to put Gwen into a mill style deck. Look, I think that overall, GWENPOOL is a fun season pass card. And I'm always going to say, get the season pass. There's not a question of a doubt. Always get the season pass. That's just obvious. However, in regards to her releasing at these stats, because again, I'm on vacation at the time you're watching this. I'm on vacation. The numbers could change. Let me know down in the comments how you think those changes affect GWENPOOL. But at these current stats, as a 4/6 that hits your hand 3 times and gives +2 to every single one that it hits, which could be the same card twice. Honestly, I think that's really good. This is 412, y'all. This is 412 in stats. That can't be slept on. Okay, look at what happened to Ms. Marvel. I expect the same to happen to GWENPOOL. So good luck, have fun, and hopefully I'll see y'all very soon as I come back from vacation. For those who do not know, my name is Guest, also known as ItsGuestGaming, and I'll look forward to seeing you back on Twitch live eventually here on the guest list.